Hello, welcome to the Writers and Wonders podcast. I'm Yurim here with Petra. We are two writers of women's fiction, 2,000 kilometers apart. Petra in Hungary focuses on magical realism. Yurim, that's me, in Norway explores themes of belonging and coming of age. Together, we wonder about writing and all that it entails to reach our goals of getting published. And on today's episode, we wanted to discuss first lines of books and why we think they work. So,
Yeah.
Petra, do you have a good first line for us that you want to talk about?
So the first one I have is this book, Tilda is Visible by Jane Tara, which is one of my comps, actually. And this will be an example of a short first line. And it goes, it started with her finger. That's it. And if you add the second sentence, because I think sometimes, I think we can allow to, jump into the second line there in many cases. So it goes, it started with her finger. It was not quite 9 a.m. when Theodore realized that the little finger on her right hand was missing. I think this first line works because I think it's short and it's intriguing. I want to know what is going on with her finger. And then when I go to the second line and the second sentence, then I obviously get a little more context. And I learned that the problem is that her finger was missing. And so I think to me, this is an example of a short, snappy opening line, which also compels me to move forward, to keep reading and wanting to find out what is going on, which is, I think, what you inevitably want from both your first line and then at least from your first page as well. And by the way, if anyone is wondering and haven't read the book, it's about a woman who is diagnosed with the condition of invisibility, a disorder that affects millions of women, mostly after the age of 40 worldwide. She is disappearing and there is no cure. And it's filled with humor, and it talks about how, as women get older in our societies, we tend to become invisible from some aspects. And this book is just, wonderfully discovering that topic. So this is, just a short explanation of why we are starting off with the disappearing finger. Okay, so that's one example. Okay, so what do you think of this first line?
Well, I definitely thought it was almost kind of creepy, in the beginning. So it caught my attention, like what's going on here? Missing fingers. I don't know. It's interesting you mentioned, I have not read the book but it's interesting you mentioned that actually there are some funny elements in it. There's some comedy. So I like it seems like then it's going to move at some kind of interesting dynamic pace.
Yeah, I think we also have to consider that maybe some readers pick up a book in a bookstore or just, browse online and maybe dive right into the first line without having more context. But I think more so, or I assume, that's just my assumption, that there are more people out there who maybe read the back of the book, and for example, for this book, you can already see like the main message, the overlying theme. And it's also specifically mentioned that this book is filled with humor. So then when you open the book and then you see the first line, you know that the missing finger is probably not going to lead you into a horror book, but it's going to be something funnier. Or at least lighter material than what you would maybe think from just thinking of a missing finger.
Sure. I mean, but it definitely draws your attention because
Yes.
it is kind of, for me, a missing finger is not exactly funny. It's still creepy. So
Yeah.
that's a nice way to draw in sort of and take
Yeah.
you down a funny path, maybe.
Yeah. And I think maybe that is the point, so that it draws you
Yeah.
in and you want to know more, whatever the genre might be, or, the rest of the story. So I think this is why this first line works.
Yeah. That is true. So can I take us down to sort of a classic
Mm,
first line
sure.
of I think I've mentioned this before, but Pride and Prejudice is one of my all-time favorites, and I think that I don't have it memorized, but I think many people, if you hear this first sentence, you will recognize
Yeah.
that it is Jane Austen. So, here we go. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. So, I mean, that, in that language of that time, it really, at first glance for me, I remember reading this probably in school and thinking, not much. But
Mhm.
then later you understand that the humor, maybe the cynicism, there's so much sub messages built into just this first sentence. And I think that is the power of this type of opening for a book,
Mm.
which is pretty fantastic if you are able to relay all of that in an opening sentence. So I think for sure this one works and it's so memorable. And now we've heard it so many times in adaptations, in movies, in TV series. I don't know if you remember the first time reading this, if what you thought about it?
I don't remember. It was such a long time ago. I can't remember. But right now, I'm thinking about why this works so well, and I think it immediately gives you maybe even the entire topic of the book that is going to come after the first line. So it tells you that marriage is going to be one of the themes. The way it's written, it's already like the writer taking her position, a stand in this subject matter, telling you also about the era of the story. So like probably, the timeline, and it puts you in the context of the book very well. And I think that it's also like a bit, I don't, not funny, but it's, the quirkiness is there. So I think, or this is how it feels to me, which often comes through the writing of Austen. I think she has a good sense of humor.
Yeah, for sure. We have to put it also in context of her time when she was writing. There's very tongue in cheek. You
Mhm.
can imagine her kind of, I would think she was sort of smiling or maybe even smirking when she put up
Yeah.
a sentence like that. So it's nice to know the power of this sort of female voice and message that was portrayed even during her time, right?
Yeah, I mean, just
So
imagine you probably right now, this sentence, if we would write a contemporary novel, uh, this sentence would sound and would read differently. I mean, because what she's talking about there is not the situation right now in 2026, I think. So she did a good job of portraying and describing her era for sure. I don't know, like for instance, like a man today with a good fortune, I don't think like their main goal is to find a wife, for example, today. So it would,
yeah, we're jumping into different territory now, huh?
yeah, I'm just saying, like she really nailed the context there, anyway, okay, should we move on to another example?
Yeah.
I have another one, which is a book that is magical realism and romance, and it's The Witch of Wild Things. And the first line is, my great aunt Nadia says it's a bad idea to reject a gift from a ghost. And I picked this one because I think this is a good example of telling the reader something about the genre immediately. So, like, you have a ghost there. So it tells you something. Maybe at this point, you don't know if it's going to be the scary kind of ghost story or something, lighter. But the ghost tells you a certain type of information about the book. And then I also like that I like it that it says it's a bad idea to reject a gift from a ghost. And then I immediately goes, why is that? I mean, I know nothing about ghosts. And again, it's just something that makes me want to know more.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think what you just said, it is for me, yeah, it's catchy because that's not the type of thing my aunt, is it the aunt in that first
Yeah.
sentence?
Great aunt.
Great aunts, yeah. That's not the type of thing my great aunt would normally say or has ever said.
Yeah, that's true too.
So I think that that's kind of interesting. You're like, what kind of family also, relations do you have? Like,
Yeah.
you do have a creepy or a crazy or maybe just, a free spirited. I don't know. So it does
Yeah.
get you thinking. And I think sometimes opening sentences have that effect, which is fun
Yeah.
because you're like, huh, okay, what's going on here?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a very good point. Probably most of us don't have the kind of family where that sentence or would come up, or your aunt telling you this thing about ghosts. So yeah, this tells you that this is already an interesting family, and you want to know their story. Yeah. Okay. So
Yeah,
that's
we
it.
all love stories that have some interesting family dynamics, or they're
Yeah.
always good, like family stories that come out of great fiction. So I think that could be fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, just the fact that she mentions ghosts, and that's an interesting topic on its own, but there's that little detail about, rejecting a gift from a ghost, like that goes even deeper. And I don't want to make these generous statements, but really, I think most of us, or let's not say most of us, maybe many people, or there are certainly people out there, including me, who has no idea there is this thing even that ghost can give you a gift, or that is there something to consider when it comes to accepting that gift or rejecting that. So it goes even deeper in that just one sentence, and it doesn't stop at ghosts. There's just a tiny extra element that makes it even more interesting to me. Yeah, so I think that's another well done example.
Yeah, well, I guess a good starting point is also, do you believe in, right? Like,
Yeah,
what do
yeah,
you
yeah.
believe? So that's also could be interesting.
Just wanted to add
Go
that,
ahead.
because since you mentioned that, if somebody sees that first line, it immediately tells them if it's for the story is for them or not, depending on whether you even like a ghost story. Like, because I'm sure there are people out there, readers, who don't want to read stories with ghosts, whether it's a funny story or a creepy one. So what I want to highlight here, I guess, is that first lines truly help you decide if you want to move on with the book or not. And I think that's also a good example. It's like not just whether you believe in ghosts or not, and but it's like, do you want to read a book that deals with ghosts? Because this book surely
Well,
will.
I think I think that's actually an interesting point you mentioned because oftentimes I wonder, I don't stop at the first line. Well, I don't think many of us do, but I do think that as we are going through this writing, searching to get published process, we do see that some agents are pretty strict about how many pages they're going to read
Hmm. Yeah.
before they sort of already decide whether or not a book is for them. A manuscript and a story fits what they're looking for. So for sure, we know. I mean, everybody loves to be reeled in with that first opening sentence, but also there are a lot of agents who will, maybe they only ask for the first 5 pages, the first 10 pages, the first 3 chapters. But I guess similarly, sometimes as I read, I don't know, maybe I will read the first 2 or 3 chapters and then like I can kind of feel like, is this boring? Does this keep me going? Is this something that will hold my interest? Do I want to find out what happens?
Yeah.
So I probably maybe I don't care that much about ghosts or whatever, but after the first sentence, I might read a little more and see, okay, maybe it's like, I'll say it, like Harry Potter was not the type of genre I ever thought I would really be that interested in.
Yeah.
And it turns out I was like really waiting for like the last two books to be published. You know what I mean? I was like one of
Mm-hmm.
those.
Yeah. Yeah, me too.
So you kind of like never know. And I mean, for myself, I'll give it a chance. But there is that something, that je ne sais quoi, that sometimes, even if it's not your normal genre, maybe it will just keep you going because it's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
So, yeah, I think we talk about this a lot and we face this a lot with querying because, like I mentioned, some agents are quite strict about how many pages or how many words they will read before
Mhm.
just, giving you the sorry, we're not a good fit or the full request ask.
Yeah. I've also seen
Yeah.
agents talking about how, like, you don't have to sweat so much when it comes to first lines. I mean, obviously, they are very powerful and important for all the reasons that we've also already discussed here. But at least when it comes to you trying to get published and being in the querying trenches, trying to get an agent's attention, you don't have to believe necessarily that it's all about the first line, at least. You know what I mean? So it's like, sure, try to nail it as much as you can and write the best version that you can. But maybe the first line is not perfect, but the first page before you would turn a page, that works very well. And then the agent will give you pointers on maybe how to rewrite the first line. So I just wanted to mention that in case somebody haven't encountered those kind of agent thoughts on social media.
Yeah, I think there's all kinds of different ways to do it. And when we had talked about having this topic for this week's podcast, I went through some of the books that I had and I was looking at the opening sentences to kind of see, oh, is there a correlation of the sort of my appreciation of a first sentence with the rest of the book? Or like, how memorable is that first sentence for me to have enjoyed the book? And I'm not sure that there's necessarily always that, or I don't think that there is a direct connection with first sentence. Will you keep reading the book? Will you finish the book? But for
Yeah.
sure, you can make an impact. And I think there are different ways you can do it. So, for example, I have this book, which I guess it's like a few years old now, but
Mhm.
it's Small Pleasures by Claire Chambers.
Okay.
And it's historical fiction. So this one, it's actually the first page is like here, I'll show you. It's like a clip of an article or
Okay.
like an announcement in
Like a
it's historical
newspaper.
fiction, so it's
Yeah.
from the North Kent Echo, Friday, 6th of December, 1957. And the
Mm-hmm.
headline is Rail Disaster, Rush Hour Trains Collide in Thick Fog, Many Dead.
Mm-hmm.
So, in some ways, it's not exactly the first line of the story, but later you learn, I don't know if this is a spoiler alert, but for the end of the story, it turns out that it's connected to this headline. And at first, when I
Okay.
was reading like the excerpt of this article, I was like, wait, what? Is this real? You're like, is this a true story? Like, is this based on fact? Is it fiction? And then you go into the first page of the first chapter and it's like June 1957. And the sentence is talking about the article, right? So then you know that this is leading into the storyline.
Yeah, I
But it's
wanted to ask,
interesting because, yeah,
I just wanted to ask, what is then the other first line, which is not from that newspaper clip, but the other first line? And is that good as well?
yeah. So the connection is basically describing the article that started it all was not even on the front page, but was just a filler on page 5. between an advertisement for the Patricia Brixey Dancing School and a report on the AGM of the Crofton North Liberals. So actually, this is the type of sentence, for me, it's not the, how do you say, normal. It's not like a
Mhm.
standard type of maybe opening. It's not trying to be like catchy with prose or draw the emotion or offer some kind of like subliminal message or something. It's almost factual, but it
Mhm.
has the nuance of introducing, okay, what is this book going to be about? And for me, it had me wondering, like in the beginning, like, wait, is this a real story? Is this based on, and then I'm like going back and I'm like, is this based on, but it already immerses you into the story. Like it felt so real. So I think, there are different ways to use sort of the opening sentence of a book to draw the reader in and kind of want you to keep reading because you start to ask these questions.
Yes. And I was also wondering as you were reading those first lines, as in the one from the newspaper and the second first line, is that I think the second first line wouldn't be as strong if the newspaper one wouldn't be, there in the beginning, I think. You know what
No,
I mean?
exactly. So I think maybe that was also part of the intention
I'm
to
sure. And
have
I'm
sort of like
also
the headline.
Yeah, I'm just also
Yeah.
wondering, like, if the story had several versions, or like maybe the writer always knew that there would be that newspaper excerpt in the beginning, or maybe at one point an editor or her agent said that, what if we put that newspaper bit there, and then the now second first line is going to feel much stronger. I would be interested in knowing that. But anyway, yeah, so um,
Well,
this,
so Claire Chambers, if you accidentally come across our podcasts, please let us know. We'd love to find out if
yeah,
that's
yeah,
how you started or it got to this phase.
yeah, and
Really like the book.
exactly because of what I said just before, that as a querying writer, you sweat so much about, trying to nail your first line. And maybe she had the first line, which is now the second, and somebody said, okay, it's working, it's fine. But then maybe through the editorial process, she herself maybe had a new idea, or someone suggested this newspaper bit there, and then it made the story more complete already, just right at the beginning. So this would, if that's the case, this would give me faith, and I think to other querying authors as well, that you don't have to nail everything 100% perfectly in the beginning, because once get in out of the querying trenches, and then have at least an agent partner, and then hopefully an editor, if they vote on you and your book, then you will have so much more of useful feedback that will also help you land that perfect first line.
Yeah. Okay, wait. So on this note, I know we're going a little out of order, but then can I share one more? Because it's along a similar wavelength in a
Yeah,
different
sure.
approach. Okay. So, well, we recently moved, so we had to go through like millions of boxes of millions of things that we don't necessarily need, but like have a hard time getting rid of. And of course, for me, that includes books because
Sure.
like there's some kind of emotional attachment to them. And I found a really old one that I don't
Okay.
even know how old or how long ago it was when I read it. So much so that the book is like yellowish
Mm-hmm.
brown. Like
Yeah.
I haven't read it for a long time, but it is The Joy Luck Club by Amy Tan,
Okay.
which also became a movie. And back then, this is like, I think it's from like, I don't even know if it's copyright 1989.
Mm.
Basically, for me, I remember reading this book, and because it was a story about Asian women in the US and their stories of immigration and belonging, which is also something I'm writing about in my second manuscript. And the first line of this is, the old woman remembered a swan she had bought many years ago in Shanghai for a foolish sum. So it's actually a story. Maybe it's like a Chinese tale or whatever. And that's the first, basically, it's about the first page and it's not really the first chapter. And similar
Mm-hmm.
to the Small Pleasures book, then the first chapter is my father has asked me to be the fourth corner at the Joy Luck Club. So again, these two sort of first sentences are not necessarily the sentences in themselves don't have so many like I said, it doesn't seem like subliminal messages or like something that's trying to emotionally pull you in. One is it seems like the beginning of a story of maybe an old wives' tale or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second first sentence is just the start of the story. But there is this sort of like, okay, like what is this story about? And also for me, like it's drawing on something in this novel. There was like the past story part, the historical, and then
Mm-hmm.
there was the modern as well. And so it
Yeah.
was an interesting way to use sort of the beginning in more than one time, like twice almost,
Mm-hmm.
to sort of lure the reader in and have you question, okay, so how is this story going to play out? And we have something a little different here.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, I mean, I obviously haven't read this in a long time. Maybe I should again, summer reading, but it's interesting how people are trying or people use their first sentences in different ways. And it doesn't always have to be all in one dump, sort of to
Mm-hmm.
do everything in the first sentence. It's using different tools and using something to grab your interest.
I saw the exact same thing as you were speaking, that in these examples, at least one element is highlighted, which draws you in. And it doesn't bother me that I don't have the full context or I don't immediately know what this story is going to be from only the first line. I just, like with the first example, I want to know why is that swan important or what is going on with the swan. And then with the other, I want to know what does it mean to be the fourth corner of the club, was it?
Mhm.
And I'm like, what does that mean? Like, what do we mean about the corners and what's the importance of the fourth
Yeah.
corner? And I have no idea yet about the club. I don't know why this one would be important, but there is just one element in both lines which is intriguing, and I just want to know more. And so, yeah, as you said, I agree that these are good examples telling you that you don't have to push everything into the first line, but it's good if you take one element that seems interesting enough for somebody who has never read your story and has never heard of it and will have the power to bring them in.
Yeah, for sure. Especially these days, as we all know, our attention spans are getting shorter. There are a
Mm-hmm.
lot of shorts and reels and so many distractions. Books are having to compete with many more and newer forms of flashy entertainment.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's very true. Okay, what do you have for us there? I see you holding a book.
Yeah. Okay. I have two examples which are a bit similar from a certain aspect because they both play with the concept of time. And I've noticed this with many first lines, actually. I will read the examples and then you will see what I mean. So the first one is, and I think this is often quoted, is from The Midnight Library from Matt Haig. And it goes, okay, wait, is this the very first part? Yes. Well, okay, you see, this is another question with first line. So here, there is first a quote from Sylvia Plath, which is okay,
Mm.
like not really the first line of the book, but it already gives you some context. So that's important. And then there's another quote, if I turn a page, which is an excerpt from the book. But this is from later on in the story. But I don't know, again, if this would truly count as the first line. And then what I think is truly the first line goes, 19 years before she decided to die, Nora's seat sat in the warmth of the small library at the Hazelden School in the town of Bedford. That's it. So that opening is very powerful, of course, 19 years before she decided to die, because I don't think we have to explain this really. I mean, the part like her deciding about dying is powerful. And then, there's that time element, which I wanted to address here, is that 19 years before that thing happened, that she made the decision to die, I think that immediately draws you in. And then I have another book, which is again a very famous one, The Particular Sadness of Lemon Cake from Amy Bender. If somebody enjoys magical realism, this is a book that they will inevitably come across. And now this says, it happened for the first time on a Tuesday afternoon, a warm spring day in the flatlands near Hollywood, a light breeze moving east from the ocean, and stirring the black-eyed pansy petals newly planted in our flower boxes. So this is also an example of a longer first line, actually. But the reason I picked this one is because this again operates with time, that time aspect. It happened for the first time on Tuesday afternoon. And so I think I see this trick a lot, actually, with first lines, that the writer refers back to a certain point in time. And I think it's just a clever approach to trying to find a point in your story where you want to start, because from another aspect, maybe this could be a prologue if you think about it. So like something happened before the actual start of the story, but it's not a prologue, and she twists it with this first line saying it happened for the first time on Tuesday afternoon. And I want to know what happened for the first time, because then I know that it happened many more times, possibly, or at least more than once. And so what is it? And then the other example was 19 years before she decided to die. And then I want to know what happened 19 years ago, which is it important that I see this or read this? And then I also want to jump to that point in time where this Nora decides to die and why that is. So these are examples for playing with time in the first line. I don't know what did you think of these when you heard them?
Well, I think when you are talking about time, it often it could introduce different ideas or themes related to time. So the Midnight Library one, there is the sort of, because it's 19 years before, right? It's, to me, raising something like, okay, the past, is it fate? Was it a choice, destiny? And also linking it to the introduction of death as something that didn't just happen to her, but there was a decision involved. So then you think, okay, like what's going on with this story? And if there is this connection to almost 2 decades ago, what kept happening or didn't happen in between that led to that decision.
Mhm.
It could be a very sad story,
Mhm.
or it could be kind of like something that raises your curiosity, because 19 years it's not a random time. There's something very
Mhm.
distinct, it seems, that the author wants to say. And
Yes.
also, when you mention time, I feel like often it introduces elements of like, so what is the current time?
Mhm.
What is maybe the current age?
Yes.
Is this person 19 now and 19 years ago was born, or are they 69 now? So I do think that there is this, as you mentioned, many authors use time in the opening to sort of get you thinking about topics maybe related to the story from the past or in the future or in the present. So that are able to sort of encompass more for the story.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that could be a good trick. I wonder if we could try something, because I just got a new book to read,
Mhm.
and I thought maybe we could read the opening sentence of this one together and
Okay.
see what our reactions might be. It's actually a book by an author that I read her newest book first. And then I was like, oh, I enjoyed the book and I wanted to go back and read her debut novel
Mhm.
just to, well, also just to see like what was the evolution in sort of her maybe writing or, it's always interesting to read debut novels as well, as we are both
Mhm.
trying to become published debut authors.
Yes.
So the author is Emily Itami, and she has written Fault Lines. This is her debut novel.
Okay.
And I read her latest one. So, okay, chapter 1. The whole Kiyoshi situation started a long time before he was ever in the picture. That's it.
My immediate thought was that this is, for me, a bit too mysterious. I don't have much to grab here, I feel. So it's a bit vague to me. As in what we discussed about some of the previous examples now, having that at least one element that is intriguing or piques, my or raises my curiosity, like you said before. There is a situation referenced, which might be the thing, but uh, can you read it one more time?
Okay, the whole Kiyoshi situation started a long time before he was ever in the picture.
Okay, maybe the before he was even in the picture part is something that would pull me in. Yeah, that's like a
See, I
maybe.
thought because we just talked about using time as sort of like an interesting way to
Mm-hmm.
alert something in the reader. And she starts off before you're like, who is he? And he was in the
Yeah.
picture. Like, what happened? What is the picture? And she's saying, right, this whole Kiyoshi situation. So for me, like, first of all, what is Kiyoshi? I think it's
Mm-hmm.
something Japanese. And because I'm interested in immigrant experiences and, intercultural sort of both themes of belonging and things like that. That to me already is kind of like, oh, I want to know what that is.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, oh, well, you just talked about other sentences that talk about time and something that happened at a different point to introduce
Mm-hmm.
something into the
Yes.
opening sentence.
Yes, that certainly is there. I agree. And I just wanted to say that I'm maybe in the maybe category with this one because, um, like I said, maybe it's a tiny bit vague for me. But then again, if I spend more time with it, um, I understand that you want to you want to know who the he is and what is that situation. I don't think it's a bad one at all, and this is just my opinion, of course. I would be happier maybe with something just a tiny bit more specific, like the swan and and I
Mhm.
don't know the other things, but yeah, it's I understand the time element in that for sure.
Well, I can read the next sentence, which I just glanced at. The
Okay.
way a calligraphy painting begins before the first black stroke makes it onto the page. So for me, that definitely has some underlines, like some cultural reparation, or I think because you have this in Korean calligraphy as well. It has to do the brush and also the material that you use to make the ink, like how you make it, you rub it against like this, and I think that might be similar or something similar in Japan as well. So
Mm-hmm.
as someone who likes stories that touch on these types of elements, but I haven't read it yet. It
Yeah.
was the first reading of the next book that I am trying to read. So
Yeah.
I just thought that could be fun to do and discuss.
Also, that the second line that you read now reminded me of something that we haven't discussed yet regarding first lines, and it's whether the tone comes through in that first line, or at least in the first few lines. And because, for example, if I think back on the examples that I had before, like the Midnight Library one was maybe lighter in tone, uh, even though it was talking about a serious thing, like she decided to die. That is what we know. And like it mentions that she was scrolling through other people's happy lives, meaning that probably she was on social media waiting for something to happen. And so it's lighter in tone. But if you remember this one, the Amy Bender one, this was more literary leaning, I think. So, especially the description part of it, which wasn't the time element, but like the warm spring day and the light breeze moving east from the ocean and the petals in the newly planted, newly planted in our flower boxes. So this was more literary leaning. And then your second line there also told me that maybe that book is also more literary lining. I don't know if I'm right. Is it more like literary?
Read it yet?
Well, okay, but
I'm just
like
kidding.
based on how the book is positioned and like what's on the back back cover, and do you think it's more literary?
Yeah, I think that there is. Ooh, I think so. I think that there is definitely it's not like straightforward commercial, or there's definitely some additional elements. I did just look up what Kyoshi means, just
Mm-hmm.
for the sake of our discussion of the first sentence. And Kyoshi is a Japanese given name and
Mm-hmm.
often meaning bright or clear. So maybe Kyoshi is the name of the he.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't
Okay.
know if there is a specific reason that the author chose Kyoshi as the name because it means bright or clear.
Yeah, maybe that's going to be
So,
revealed later on.
yeah. So we'll see when I finish the book and we have something to talk about later. Maybe I'll let you know.
Okay. I will be curious if, because of the second line that you read about, calligraphy and what you
Hmm.
explained to me about the tradition and the knowledge behind that, I don't have knowledge of that kind. And I'm wondering if somebody who is not immersed in that culture, would it be harder for them to read that story? Or is it written in a way where I would be able to, I don't know, relate to it and, engage with the main character and all those things that we always talk about. So, because I had no idea about that, bit of calligraphy, of the calligraphy word that you mentioned before about, the material that you use and the ink and the stuff.
I wasn't going to keep reading, but actually, she does go on to explain a bit about it.
Okay.
So the
Okay,
next
then.
sentence is begins when the painter collects together scroll and brushes and grinds up the pigment, or even before that, when he or she, and yet in this country, it's almost invariably he, has an idea in his head of what to paint. So I feel like that
Hmm.
third sentence does a bit of what you just asked
Okay.
about, a little more explanation about the calligraphy process. And also it's a bit loaded here because she writes specifically like when he or she, and yet in this country, invariably, it's almost invariably he, right? So she's
Yeah.
making a point about there's some kind of male versus female element here. And then the
Uh-huh.
next sentence, so the scene was already set, the pigment crushed, the painterly hand poised. So, I mean, we've been talking about opening sentences in different ways and variations. And also, we mentioned like agents are looking sometimes, the first sentence is, of course, a tool and it's capturing, but now we've gone in up to the third sentence. And I feel like that paints a bigger, I mean, no pun intended, no calligraphy pun intended, a little bit more of this picture,
Yeah.
drawing me in as a reader of like wanting to read what's next. And maybe in my situation, there's a small bias because I read her latest book recently and I enjoyed that. So therefore, I wanted to go back and read the debut novel. So maybe I already kind of know, like, well, I think this is along the lines of in terms of content or maybe writing style that could draw me in. So
Yeah.
I think there is some perception of that as well when you read authors that you already know, which I
Yes.
find comfort in as well. I love to read, certain authors, their next book, because you sort of know, like, I like this author, whether it's their style or what they write about, their story themes. So there could be an element of that as I read.
Also, can I just say that I don't know if it happens with you as well and others, but when I have an author I like, and then I move on to her or his other or their other books, I am more forgiving when it comes to any element of the book. But since we're talking about first lines, maybe I like Emily Henry books, and I couldn't for the life of me tell you any of her first lines. But let's say maybe the first one was like really something I fell in love with. And then moving on, I almost, as just a reader, I truly don't care about the first lines. I just want to read another story from her. So
Yeah.
which is a funny thought because here we are having, talking, I have a separate podcast episode about dissecting first lines, but maybe the reader's
Yeah.
experience is sometimes not that strict. Like sometimes you just fly through that first line, and especially if it's one of your favorite authors, you really just fly through it, and you're like, okay, but let's get to the, the rest of the book. So
When you are in the phase that we are in where we're trying to become published debut authors, we are probably overthinking a lot of things.
yeah,
And, what's the saying? Like, we are our worst critics. Like, you
sure.
you have to, with each, when you're in the query trenches, like with each rejection, you have to wonder, okay, like, why did I get rejected this time? Is it my first sentence? Is it my first,
Yeah.
chapter? Should I have made a different excerpt or, so I think it's very natural.
Yes, certainly. I mean, I I don't have a number exactly, but I've rewritten my opening line many, many times, and also while being in the query trenches because of what you just said, that I don't know if that was the problem or not, but I think maybe during querying I only changed it like once or twice. Yeah, but it's there. The experiences, I think this experience is shared by many writers out there, so you definitely want to nail it.
Yeah, for sure. I think when I started drafting my current manuscript, there was a time, especially when you're only in the like first chapter, I think almost every day I would go back and read from the beginning, and I would change almost every day the opening of the first chapter. And then you begin to, like, you don't make forward strides because you keep going back. And then I was like, this is not that healthy. Okay, let's move on. Let's get to the halfway point. Let's get to the climax. Let's move forward. That's the important thing about the first draft.
Mm.
So,
Yes, definitely true about the first draft, but also I think in my experience now that I have just one full manuscript, I realized that I shouldn't have spent that much time trying to nail the first line during writing the manuscript, because I think it's somehow, at least for me, it's easier after you have the full story, So I wrote the full manuscript, and then I had new ideas on how I should start it exactly. I have different ideas, and it's completely different from when maybe I was in the first draft phase and I thought, okay, this is going to be the first line, and no, it won't be the first line. Like definitely not. But for that, I had to finish the entire story to then come to those new ideas. I don't know if I'm curious if we have writers listening or watching us. What is your experience with that? Do you write the first line like in the beginning or maybe during? writing the manuscript or after when the whole story is written. Feel free to share this with us. Okay, so I just wanted to bring in one more example, um, which is a funny one, I think, because we haven't touched on a funny first line um, so far, and it also speaks to that topic or that idea that we covered a bit about the tone and that first line giving you an idea of what type of story this is going to be. And first line is imagine you're a bird. That's it. But what really makes it funnier is if you go on to the second sentence, which is you can be any kind of bird, but those of you who've chosen ostrich or chicken are going to struggle to keep up. That's it. And obviously, this depends on the kind of humor that you like. But for me, this is a funnier opening. And this is, by the way, from the Bookish Life of Nina Hill.
Mm-hmm.
And I specifically wanted to bring this example in because it immediately tells you that this is more of a commercial book. It's going to be a funny book, or at least very lighthearted, probably. And even if you don't read the back or have any idea about the overall story, I think this opening tells you that about the style and the tone that you can expect throughout the book. Like, compared to not just because of the mention of death, but like these are completely different books, even only if you judge them by the first line, or this one, which is absolutely literary leaning. This is more of an upmarket one, actually. So when you go deeper, it's not as literary as this one, but this one is purely, commercial and fun and has a big heart to it in lighter aspect. So, I mean, it says, there are the praises here on the back, and it says it's witty, emotional, funny, and uplifting and thoughtful. So those kind of things. And I think those are absolutely mirrored in the first line as well. As like a closing thought, should we like summarize what do we think are or should be in the first line, or what we value in the first line? So I'm thinking things like I like it when I have information maybe about the main character, anything that tells me something about the main character. It's also good when the first line gives me some kind of context, but I don't need everything as we discussed, just maybe one or a few elements here and there. And then the voice, the tone, as just now discussed, is a good idea to let the reader feel in the first line. What else?
I think things that make you curious about what is the first sentence referring to later in the story. For sure, wanting you to go on to the next few sentences. And then, of course, the magic page turner. I think, yeah, I appreciate elements where there's something that might not be very straightforward, because I
Mm-hmm.
think that helps arouse curiosity. And essentially, I think opening sentences are important for helping the reader go through, wanting to go forward,
Mm-hmm.
which is the goal. With that said, I think the caveat is we can't just leave it to the first sentence. Sometimes I think it seems like maybe grouping those first few sentences together, and then, in my case, I think I like to read the first couple of chapters, maybe first few chapters. I think I mentioned Harry Potter. I remember reading the first book and having a hard time in the beginning getting through the beginning of the book and the first book in general, because it was just not really me. It wasn't the type of story that I read. But
Mm-hmm.
as I read more and more, I was hooked. And then I was the one reading, sobbing, when Dobby dies and things like that. So I
Yeah.
think that's the magic of writing and portraying that to a reader. But of
Mhm.
course, now you've left me, I'm just imagining what kind of bird I would be, right? It better not be an ostrich or what was the other one?
A chicken.
Yeah, yeah. So,
I would be an owl for sure.
with a little bit of
Yeah.
I'm not sure, I have to think about it now, and I hear a lot of birds outside, so definitely not like a peacock. I feel like too flashy for me.
Yeah. Might
Yeah.
be. Might be.
Okay. Thanks to everyone for listening and looking forward to seeing you in the next episode.
Yeah. Thanks everyone. See you.
Bye.